It's better.
Right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Monday 8 p.m. live stream. So first of all, a warm welcome to all of those joining us. And without any further ado, let me introduce, of course, my always special Monday evening guest, Rebecca Butler. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, David. Hello, everybody.
As you can see, Rebecca is broadcasting somewhere where the light conditions are somewhat imperfect. But Rebecca, I'm sure we can hear you, even if we may not necessarily be able to discern you. But anyway, you're very welcome. Anyways, it's about what we're going to talk about. So, hey, listen, folks, as you join on your numbers, I just wanted to say a couple of things, really. First of all, if you're watching this on YouTube, you got to make sure you subscribe to my YouTube, whilst I still have a YouTube channel, that is, or my good friends at YouTube. That's better, Rebecca. Our good friends at YouTube don't like me, so there's a surprise. And they limit numbers. But good news is other video platforms such as Rumble are extremely helpful to me. So anyway, you're all welcome to the stream. And this one's going to be a little bit different, and that's good. Variety is the spice of life, Rebecca. And as of course, you can't have been watching the news in the past, well, week anyway, and certainly the past couple of days, without seeing vaccines all over the media. And because, of course, Rebecca here equally follows these things, I know that Rebecca put out a couple of videos on her views on vaccine, the COVID vaccine, that is. And I don't agree with Rebecca on this one. And we don't have to agree with everything, do we, Rebecca? We're big and bad enough to be able to hold different opinions. But a diversity of opinions is what I really like. And it's one of the reasons I'm so keen to have Rebecca here, because it would be such a boring echo chamber if it was just me saying all the things that you guys want to hear. Not that that's necessarily a sin, but it's boring. So for tonight, here is the procedure. Rebecca's going to talk you through her views on the COVID vaccine. I think she's pretty keen to take it, or well, she can explain, but her videos have made that clear. So Rebecca will put the case for the vaccine, or the COVID vaccine, and I will put the case against it. And then what I'd like you folks to do then is listen to what Rebecca has to say, please, and respect what she has to say. And then you can listen to me, and you can disrespect me if you want, because I don't care. But I'd like us to do that. And then we'll do about 10 minutes, Rebecca, I think, roughly each, in terms of how we see things, pro and con. And then, folks, we're going to open it up to all you guys. So then you can come in and ask us whatever you want. You can challenge Rebecca, challenge me, agree with us, disagree, whatever. But that should be the way we're going to do this one. So I hope you enjoy it. I see your comments, by the way. So without further ado, good thing is that Rebecca and we always get a great laugh at this. So, I mean, if for nothing else, this is good. And as I say, because I suspect most of you folks may lean my direction, that's why it's really important to respect Rebecca's opinion, right? So I want that. Don't want any bad comments or anything. So, Rebecca, I think without further ado, I'm just looking at the clock, so it's gone 5 minutes in. The floor is yours for the next 10 minutes or so. And once you've had your bit, then I'll come in with my bit.
Okay, thank you, David. Interesting to see the comment from Chris Davis. That tweet went down like a lead balloon. If you think that was a lead balloon, you should have seen the Facebook response to basically the same tweet. My Facebook tweet, my video was about 11 minutes long. It was very much more detailed, and boy, did it provoke an outrage. The reason I did it in the way I did it was deliberately to provoke people, because I really wanted to see what was being said. And I set out on both videos that I feel very strongly against censorship. And I really, really think that it's wrong for the social media platforms to silence dissent, because it's only when you can hear what people are saying that you can bring about real change. And that means either holding back on the vaccine or changing the policy of the government based on what people are saying. Now, many of you have seen tonight when Boris Johnson spoke that he specifically said that the vaccine will not be mandatory. And that is something that I 100% agree with. Under no circumstances should the vaccine be mandatory, because that is forcing people against their will. And that really offends against every principle of consent in both the law and medicine. Effectively, you'd be assaulted if it was compulsory. So I'm absolutely delighted that he's made it very clear. Matt Hancock has also said it's not compulsory, but level of trust with Matt Hancock is very low. So where do I stand on this? The coronavirus is a dangerous virus, and it puts more people in hospital than it really ought to do. So if I got flu, I wouldn't expect to go into hospital. But if I got coronavirus, there's a very high likelihood I would have to go into hospital. Once I am at the point of being in hospital, needing to be in hospital, my risk of death escalates quite significantly. If you then put me on intensive care, I'm really facing death either on intensive care or in the 4 weeks following. Because coronavirus, the novel coronavirus, is not a respiratory disease, it's an inflammatory disease, it does have longer term effects on all of the organs of the body, and none of that should be sniffed at. And none of the commentators, none of the lockdown skeptics have ever actually held back on how severe the disease can be if you get it badly. A lot of the lockdown skeptics and a lot of the people who are skeptical about the vaccine talk about a 99.8% survival rate. Well, that's all well and good, but you have to look at the mortality. And the number that you look at is the case fatality rate. Now, I have looked at today's data, and today's data estimates that the case fatality rate, so that is a confirmed coronavirus test, the case fatality rate is 2%. Okay, so that is equivalent to going to a packed house at Manchester United with 75,000 people in the audience, a gunman turning up in the middle of the pitch with 1,560 bullets, live ammunition, and a machine gun. And every single one of those bullets shot into the crowd will kill somebody. Would you, A, stand and watch it happen, knowing that 1,560 people were going to die, or would you run like hell? I think you would run like hell, because 1,560 out of 75,000 is a hell of a lot of lives lost. And when you multiply that up on the population without putting any controls in place for coronavirus, that is a lot of deaths. Now, the majority of deaths will be in the people who are expected to die. They've lived their life expectancy. So the average age of death is 82. That's because that's the most vulnerable group. But a lot of 82-year-olds actually have had their lives cut short because they could have expected to live maybe longer. And that's an average age. So if the average age is 82, that means a lot of people under the age of 82 are dying. And we do know that up to the age of 40, your risk of dying from this is virtually zero. It's only when you get above 40 that the risks start to become apparent. And this is believed to be due to the protective effect of your T killer cells, which is part of your immune system that deals with pathogens as they arrive. So, in terms of population numbers in the UK, just under 50% of the population is over 40 years of age. So about 33 million people are in the susceptible group for COVID, mortality or morbidity. Morbidity is long-term complications. Mortality is death, okay? We don't really know about long COVID, but from everything I've seen about it, you don't want to get it. So how do you deal with COVID? Yes, pharma is something that deals with COVID. It deals with it by use of dexamethasone, which is given intravenously. You can deal with it with hydroxychloroquine, which is given intravenously. There are monoclonal antibodies, which are given intravenously. There are also beta interferon therapies given in an inhaler form through a ventilator. All of these are acute medical treatments. They are used in the more sick patients, and they do improve to some extent. They do improve survival. Remdesivir was thought to be a leader. That was a drug used for Ebola. That was thought to be a leader, but in fact, they've actually withdrawn it now and really scale back on the patients they use remdesivir on. Now, a lot of you will know the difference between viruses and bacteria, but just a quick recap. Viruses work by effectively being a parasite within your cell. They invade your DNA and they kind of use your DNA as a means of replication. So they replicate your own cells, and that's how they are successful as a virus. So more like a parasite than a bacterium, which goes into your body, and then because of the environment of your body, the warmth, the oxygen, the blood supply to the tissues, the bacteria reproduce on their own, and that's why antibiotics are so effective against them. So just remember that actually viruses are effectively untreatable. The treatments work to some extent, but the gold standard for viruses is vaccination. There is no doubt about that. There is not a single lockdown critic at the moment who would say that a vaccine is not the gold standard, because prophylaxis is better than treatment. You don't want to get coronavirus, particularly if you're over 50. It is a very, very risky disease to have. Now, I am simply quoting numbers. Let's look at the vaccines that are available. There are about 200 vaccines currently in production or in going through stages of investigation. The three leaders are Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca. Each of those vaccinations has recruited in the region of 40-odd thousand recruits to test it. I cannot stress to you how high that number is. The number of people who've pushed back on me and said, but hydroxychloroquine. Hydroxychloroquine was tested on 400 people before they started using it, which is why they've pulled back on it a little bit. Hydroxychloroquine causes horrendous side effects in some people. It can cause aplastic leukemia. It can cause terrible blood clotting problems and has a very poor side effect profile. It was originally used for other purposes, but they decided it may have some antiviral properties. Indeed, it does, but it's not the sort of drug that you should be taking from a pharmacy because it is not safe. It's cheap enough because it's out of patent. The Regeneron forget it. It's $2,000 a shot. Remdesivir, similar. Beta interferon, by the time you're taking that, you're pretty much going to die anyway. So the vaccines are extremely well tested. I cannot stress to you, the cohort numbers are so large. We normally license drugs on trials involving a few thousand recruits. Okay, so Nurofen, paracetamol, all those drugs with a huge side effect profile, they all became registered over a course of quite a long time, by the way, but their trial numbers were very low because by and large, unless you're in a global pandemic, you simply do not get the numbers for the clinical trials. And in my last job as a nurse, I ran a clinical trial at Southampton in the breast unit, and we were looking at second-line treatment for breast cancer. And we were the biggest centre in the world when I was running it, and we only had 100 patients. The total cohort study was 2,000 for the UK. So the reason I'm saying this is I need to give you an idea that when people say that their concern for the vaccine is it's been rushed through, time is not the issue. It's the number of exposures to the human population that is the issue, okay? So it's the number of people who have been exposed to it, because then that will pull out the side effects and the adverse reactions. Pfizer, in 45,000 cases, has not had a single adverse reaction, okay? So reactions are graded. A serious adverse reaction actually isn't that serious, okay? The extreme adverse reactions are things like convulsions, blood clotting disorders, blood production disorders. There hasn't even been a severe reaction. The most you can expect from the Pfizer vaccine is 2 days of raised temperature and a headache. The Pfizer vaccine is the new one, and the Moderna, by the way. They're the messenger RNA vaccines. They have shown in their phase 3 trials to be effective at preventing people getting coronavirus. So what they did was they did a double-blind randomized trial. They took their big cohort of people, their 40-odd thousand people, they took them all and they split them into 3 groups. One group had the placebo, so it had water injections. Another group had the injections at a lower dose and then a higher dose 2 weeks later. And the third group had the same dosage 2 weeks apart. The group with the lower than the higher dose, when exposed to COVID in phase 3 trials, it was shown to be 94% effective, which means that only 6 people contracted COVID-19 after exposure to coronavirus when they'd had that specific formulation of the vaccine. The other limb that had the vaccine, but in the different formulation, 2% more got symptoms of COVID. Okay, to give you an idea, the influenza vaccine is an extremely effective vaccine at suppressing influenza every year. That is a genetically modified vaccine, and that is only 60% effective. But that 60% effectiveness is enough to keep the health service operating when we are able to vaccinate the cohort that are most likely to be hospitalized. And many of you will recall over the years that in the flu season, elective surgery gets cancelled. That really is code for young people with cancer have their operations cancelled because the intensive care beds are filled with elderly people suffering pneumonia. That's a 60% vaccine, and it's deemed good enough. This is at 90%. That is a staggeringly high success for a vaccine, particularly in its first release. Now, people are worried about safety. They're worried about the mRNA. They are saying that the mRNA goes into your cell and can mutate, and then it's basically for life. It's like a Frankenstein treatment. It's not. We use mRNA all the time in cancer treatment. A lot of the mRNA treatments are highly successful in cancer. They are state-of-the-art. We have never needed an mRNA vaccine like we do now. So the technology is 15 years old. We are now needing it because of this pandemic. It is easy to roll out at absolute high speed because it is a laboratory created sort of effective piece. It is entirely synthesized, unlike the flu vaccine, by the way, which is harvested in eggs. And you need to go through the life cycle of the virus in the eggs in order to come out with the influenza virus every year. It's very difficult to scale up a live vaccine in that way. So this mRNA is effectively a chain of chemicals. And what they do is when they're injected, your muscle in which it's injected has a response to the mRNA, and your muscle tissues then force your body to produce an antibody that recognizes the spike protein. So it's encouraging your body to make the right thing, to make the right antibody. The mRNA dies within 48 hours of being injected. As you know, it can't last at greater than -70 for very long at all. Its lifespan is only 5 days because of the cold chain distribution. So it really has a very short lifespan in your body. And critically, and I know people are worried about this more than anything, it doesn't go to a second generation. So once it has gone into your cell and caused the spike protein antibody to be produced, that cell does not replicate. And that's what people are most worried about. And that's what I was most worried about the mRNA vaccine. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is different. It's more like the old-fashioned vaccine. And what that is an altered gorilla coronavirus virus. They've genetically altered it to reduce its lethality. They've changed it. So it's the same genetic modifications. They've changed it to make it specific to novel coronavirus SARS-2. So it's more like the old style. The distribution is much easier with AstraZeneca, but as you've probably seen today, the efficacy is 4% less than Pfizer. So if you want a vaccine that's really going to last and has the best protection against coronavirus, you're looking at Pfizer. The interesting thing about the AstraZeneca vaccine is that it actually prevents asymptomatic people completely from transmitting virus. So the AstraZeneca vaccine will probably be rolled out in school children because they are asymptomatic carriers. Just to finish what I'm saying, we have pre-ordered 300 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. They're £2.80 per dose. Pfizer is closer to 30 with huge logistical problems. We only have enough for 10 million people on the Pfizer vaccine, and that's because of the cost differential. It's really important not to get engaged in the discussions about whether Patrick Vallance has shares in AstraZeneca, whether Big Pharma's taking over the world. Oxford University agreed with AstraZeneca that the only way they would go in on a joint project was a not-for-profit basis. So all of the drug companies that have been funded by taxpayer money, and that's in the US and the UK and across Europe, Sweden is a co-owner with the UK of the AstraZeneca vaccine. It is on the basis that it's not for profit. So nobody is making a lot of money over this. A final point, people are concerned about the loss of indemnity. This goes back to the 1984 Health Act. This was a provision made in order to produce a vaccine, a rapid vaccine for HIV. As many of you will know, that was impossible to do because the technology simply wasn't there. They actually found that HIV wasn't as prevalent in the population as they feared once they got the health messaging out, really about wearing condoms, and they started treating AIDS victims with monoclonal antibodies like Regeneron. But as I said, you are talking at $2,000 a dose, and they usually need years and years of treatment. So HIV vaccination is now in place. Those are live attenuated vaccines, a bit like the influenza vaccine, and the rollout will actually improve life survival chances in places like Africa, where, as you know, children are born with HIV. So I have to stress to you that vaccine is the gold standard treatment. I'm quite happy to discuss the other numbers related to COVID, but think of the Manchester, Old Trafford, think of that in your head, 75,000 people in there. This bug would kill 1,500 people and you'd stand there watching it happen.
Okay, Rebecca, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. I think you've covered pretty much all the bases there. And, as I say, I do want people to be respectful of you. So because what we will do, I'm going to go through now the case against. But I want us to have a bit of time whenever I've done my bit, Rebecca, so we can both probably, I suspect you'll be asked more questions, give you a chance to come back and stuff. So so basically, you've heard the case as Rebecca sees it for vaccines. I'm going to talk about the case against. Okay. Now let me start off by saying I agree with vaccines. I support vaccines. Shock horror. I've taken vaccines. My kids have taken vaccines, and I thoroughly approve of vaccines. So just want to start off by making it clear, I'm no anti-vaxxer, because sometimes people who oppose the COVID vaccine are described in these kind of derogatory terms, okay? But I'm not anti-vaxxer. But I have no confidence that what is being touted as a breakthrough COVID vaccine is anything of the sort. And I personally won't be taking it. And I would urge anyone who's watching this on live or on replay, because I know there's many watch it in replay, have a think about my reasons for adopting my approach. I'll give you my top 10 reasons, right? Top 10 reasons for why I think the COVID vaccine is a problem. I can't say it more than that, because big tech censorship being what it is would probably shut me down if I actually said other stronger words. Let me start off by quoting no less an authority than Chris Whitty, the CMO for England. And Mr. Whitty's on record saying that, his words, not mine, I think it's easy to get a perception that if you get older and you get this virus, then you're a goner. Absolutely not. The great majority of people will recover from this virus, even if they are in their 80s. Chris Whitty, not David Vance. And that is a central reality in all of this. You know, the mortality rate of COVID, and I mean off COVID, not with COVID, is not that far off the flu. And this has been the first fundamental year of COVID SARS-2. So there is, putting in perspective, Rebecca mentioned the flu vaccine. Flu vaccine efficacy is around about 50% in a good year. It can be as high as 60. 2018, it was 24% effective. The flu vaccine's been around for 75 years, folks. So I just like to put things in a little bit of context about the alleged Spanish flu that we face that requires the world to be vaccinated. Point one. Point two, if I can, sorry here, a little technical issue. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Second thing I wanted to say is the first SARS-CoV-1 hit the world back in 2002. Do you remember that? And it was officially a global pandemic and described as such because it killed people in 29 different countries. Now, the scale wasn't as great as it is for COVID-2, but nonetheless, it is what it was. That was 2002. 18 years on, no vaccine. Strange that, isn't it? Moving on. if you accept that the COVID vaccine that Rebecca's talked about, be it from Pfizer or be it from the other two companies, are safe, as the media are absolutely ramming down your throats today, ask yourself, why have the manufacturers all sought and been granted legal indemnity from prosecution in the event of things going wrong? Does this rush to gain legal immunity reassure you? And actually, just on that point, I just wanted to see if I can share this with you. Oh my. Nigeria sues Pfizer for $7 billion over illegal tests in kids with vaccines. Oh, let's have a look at Moderna. Moderna's CEO sold nearly $2 million worth of his stock ahead of his breakthrough vaccine filing. He's now worth $3 billion. Such a coincidence, isn't it? These things are, of course, entirely coincidental and obviously imbue you all, like me, with huge amounts of confidence. 3 big pharma companies have had these alleged breakthroughs. Rebecca's mentioned them, Pfizer, Moderna, and Oxford University in conjunction with AstraZeneca. Now, between them, I think they've tested around 100,000 people, roughly. I think it's roughly around that, Rebecca. Of those that were tested, I think 200 or so actually had COVID, which is a remarkably small cohort of COVID in such a large number of the population. And of course, what we don't know from a lot of these companies is when they tell us, for example, that the vaccines are very successful and provide immunity, well, we don't know, does the immunity last? Does it last for a week, a month, 6 months, a year? What happens if the virus mutates? Viruses mutate, coronaviruses mutate. So will that mean a different virus a year? These are things that I think is perfectly reasonable to ask. Got another one I wanted to just put up here on the screen. Just on this point, this is from Mr. Moderna. He, quote, "We do not know how long immunity will last, as volunteers will have to be followed for much longer before that can be answered. There are hints it offers some protection in older age groups who are at most at risk of dying from COVID, as Rebecca said, but there's not full data." The guy goes on to tell the BBC that the data suggests so far that it doesn't appear to lose its potency with age, but he doesn't know because he hasn't been around long enough. So it is not known whether the vaccine just stops people becoming severely ill or if it stops them spreading the virus too. Now, those aren't my words. Those are the words of a spokesman for Moderna. So we should need to listen to what the drug companies are actually saying, not just what their press releases are saying, not what the BBC are telling you. You've got to listen to actually what they're saying themselves. There's another one I wanted to put up here. This is again from the States now. So this is to do with Pfizer, Rebecca. Emergency approval is just a first step required. For a full approval, the FDA needs about 6 months. Well, guess what? That's being dropped. Who needs 6 months when you can just rush this one out there? So, these things concern me, and I'm putting it no more strongly than that. And it should concern you all as well. I think, I don't think any sane person would disagree with a vaccine that could be applied to some people if they wanted and assure those people of alleviation of symptoms or protection. That no sane person, I think, would oppose that unless you're fixated about stuff, and I'm not. But I'm afraid the timelines in this are remarkably rushed. Now, spoiler alert, I worked with AstraZeneca for about 10 years. So I know a few things about AstraZeneca, a very good company, actually, a lot of respect for AstraZeneca. And I got to know a lot of people working in the research, the R&D side of things of AstraZeneca. And believe you me, the timelines don't happen in 3 to 6 months, even with all their resource. And of course, the only reason AstraZeneca do these things, as has been pointed out earlier, is because there's loads of money in it. And, one of the things that these viruses, Rebecca, that or that the manufacturers have said is they want to spread them. They want to spread the love all around the world. They want Africa to get them. They want everywhere to get them. Even if those countries themselves do not have an obvious problem with COVID-19. Check out the rates of infection of COVID-19, for example, in Central African republics. It's virtually not there. The only country in Africa that really has any significant COVID-19 is down in South Africa. And I got that from a South African. So, I'm a wee bit curious to understand, why do they need to blitz the world with COVID-19, with the COVID-19 vaccine? Rather than those targeted areas, say, where you might say, well, look, there maybe seems to be a problem there or here, and do it that way. That seems much more sensible, to me. Another thing I wanted to put up just while I'm at it. Rebecca talked about the delivery mechanism for the for some of these vaccines, not the Oxford one, but the other two. And this is from the manufacturer, so I'm not saying anything. And this is the manufacturer saying there can be no assurance that our LNPs, that's the delivery mechanism, will not have undesired effects. Our LNPs could contribute in whole or in part to one of the following. And then you see them listed there: immune reactions, different forms of reactions, antibody reactions. And that's to the PEG from which the lipids are associated with. The PEG is basically the chemical, the delivery mechanism that puts it into you. So all I'm saying is that I'm just saying what the manufacturers are saying. There's no assurances of undesired effects. Now, you might think, oh, David, but that's a bit cynical of you, because the media's been essentially dancing the hallelujah chorus for the last, couple of days anyway. I mean, I had the misfortune to listen to the BBC, and this is being now as sold incredibly strongly on the back of research from these large companies, which has not been published. It has not been peer reviewed. So essentially, we're taking them at their word. And as I've shown you, you've got to be a bit careful before you take these organizations at their word. I'm not saying they have bad intent, but what I am saying is that rushing such things through so quickly could carry severe consequences. And again, I think that's a reasonable point of view. Another reasonable point of view is one which, again, Rebecca did mention, and that is look, if this is going to be forced on people, then that's just not, if it's mandatory, that's a real problem. Well, it would be a real problem, because I think the country might rise up. And Boris has reassured us, and Matt Hancock has reassured us. But, and this is where I have to be kind of harsh, Boris also told us it would take 3 weeks to flatten the curve. Boris told us there would be no second lockdown. And as for Matt Hancock, honestly, if Matt Hancock told me what time in the day it was, I would check my watch, because quite honestly, I wouldn't believe Matt Hancock. So the reassurances of Boris and Matt Hancock mean less than zero to me. However, I agree with Rebecca, actually. I don't think it'll be made mandatory in the sense of, legal requirement. But you've heard them talk in the last 48 hours about freedom passes. That was flagged up helpfully in the media over the weekend. Get your freedom pass. Well, as others have pointed out in social media today, and it's a fair enough point, if you need a freedom pass to get out, that kind of suggests you're a prisoner. That's a very interesting way of looking at things, that you need a freedom pass. I'm a free man. I don't need government to give me permission to do anything within the law. So I kind of object to freedom passes, and it makes me worry. Is this how they're going to do it? Or are they going to do it by simply saying, look, David, you don't need to have one. Don't be so silly. It's not mandatory. You want to get on a flight and travel do you want to do that again? Well, I'm sorry, you haven't had the vaccine. You want to go to see Manchester United? Get the vaccine. And I have grave suspicions that this is exactly how they may choose to do it. And then another point on this, which I wanted to throw in, watching my time desperately here, Rebecca, because I want us all to re-engage. It's not just me on a solo here. I also, the thing is, so you get your vaccine. If people want to take a vaccine, I think, Rebecca, they should be allowed to take a vaccine, no problem. And I think if other people like me say, we're not taking a vaccine and don't you dare limit my freedoms as a consequence, that's also reasonable, I think. I refuse, I think that's a fair-minded person would look upon that kind of fairly. The other thing is, as regards our freedoms, will this vaccine take away the need for wearing the mask, the muzzle? Will it take away the need for social distancing? Will it do those things? Will it enable decimated sectors of our economy, such as hospitality, to reopen? I doubt it. I'm certainly. I heard no less an authority than Dr. Anthony Fauci himself state what I've just said, that he didn't think that initially, in any regard, there could be a return to what it was like in going previously. So masks would continue to be part of life, as would social distancing, as would hand washing, all the rituals of COVID-19. They continue, except you've got this experimental vaccine in your system. So all these things give me concern. And as I say, I mean, I think I'm trying to phrase this reasonably. If they concern me, I'm certainly not going to be at the front of the queue to take such a vaccination. I believe in good science, which I know Rebecca does as well. We share that. I don't know that you can. The Supremes once said you can't hurry love, Rebecca. I'm not sure you can hurry. They can hurry these kind of vaccines, but certainly we're being asked to believe that. So I think.
Correct. Just a couple of inaccuracies because you've quoted an FDA. We are not under the FDA in Britain. We're under the MHRA. We're under
Pfizer is though.
No, it will not get registered in the UK without MHRA regulation. Absolutely not. Any drugs have to go through our system before they are approved. It doesn't matter where they're made. So MHRA is independent. The testing that MHRA does and the data MHRA demands is the same for every single vaccine, every single drug, every single medical procedure, every single medical piece of instrumentation. They have a data set to complete. If you don't complete the data set, you don't get approval. It is a 100% independent of everybody organization that certifies the drug. And in my view,
Rebecca.
If MHRA says it's okay, I'll take it. There is no such thing as a 100% safe anything. Nurofen kills people. Paracetamol kills people. It just doesn't kill very many. Vaccine. I looked at the research things today. In 45 million vaccines given 2 years ago, in 1 year in America, there was one death, and they couldn't attribute it to the vaccine. It happened 1 month after the vaccine. That is a staggeringly high safety record.
Yeah, but Rebecca,
higher than monoclonal antibodies.
Yeah, I'm not talking about those things.
Anything.
Hang on. You brought up, I mean, I specifically referenced the FDA, and you challenged back against and you referenced the UK system. But by the same token, are you suggesting that the United States is more casual about the well-being and health of its people?
No.
Because why has the FDA put such conditionality around it? Why have they done that, Rebecca, if it's all okay?
But they haven't even seen the data yet. So you can't, I don't know what date that article was from, but they haven't submitted the regulatory data yet. So it can't say that it's seen the data and has reported on it, because it hasn't received it.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that. Yeah, and
trial.
Yeah, and what they're saying is when they've seen 6 months of information, then they'll have a look at it. That's what they said. So I'm not saying that they've seen that, but they haven't got 6 months, and they will break their word in that. No, sorry, Rebecca. I have to be no.
It's not a time determined issue. It is it's the number of patients, and normally in vaccine development it takes 4 to 5 years. But the reason why this has been so quick is that they have recruited massive number of people. It's the N value, the number of patients that is more critical than anything else in a drug trial. It's the cohort study. So the timing is irrelevant. It's numbers that are relevant. Because
well, then you're suggesting the FDA doesn't know what they're talking about because
no,
that's from them.
No, I'm not.
But
I'm
you
not saying
are.
what they're talking about. I'm saying they haven't received the data yet. They've said.
Yeah, even more reason to be concerned.
No, they've said that the issues that they are going to be looking at with this particular vaccine, because it's new, is basically the carrying agent. That's what they've said, is the substrate that the vaccine sits in. And that's the same with a lot of vaccines. You see a lot of the stuff that people claim about vaccines is that they're worried about the metal elements within the vaccines themselves that cause long-term liver damage. And that is one of the anti-vaxxers' very strong arguments about vaccinations. So, you know, I'm not saying the FDA's lower or higher. Absolutely not. The regulatory regimes are different. They're just different. It's not higher or lower. You also mentioned Pfizer litigation. I do need to make, it's not fair to get it wrong, okay? The 7 billion over illegal treatment was they didn't get consent. They didn't seek consent to those treatments. And in American drug trials, and I know this because I've done American drug trials, the consent aspect is like reading a War and Peace. They literally present the patient with inches thick of consent. In the UK, when we run a drug trial, we don't do that. And the Pfizer litigation was about not getting adequate consent, which is wrong. Okay, I'm not saying it's right, but it was consent that they didn't get. And that's
and they settled for a substantial amount of money. If I didn't put that one up, because actually this is the one here where Nigeria was suing them for 7 billion. Now there's a bit of monkeying about with governments there and all that. I get that, but the fact of the matter is, and I mean, Rebecca, let me finish this. No, let me finish. If you want to go through the history of payouts from drug companies for when things go wrong, it is quite a kind of an alarming scenario. Obviously, I understand if you try new stuff, things can go wrong, you know, and every human life is precious and all of that. But when you rush things through with the intention for the first time ever of having a global vaccine, because that's what this is about. Let's be clear. This is not just for the UK. This is for everywhere, including parts of the world where it's absolutely not needed. Then I think it's important that robust procedure is kind of followed. And in this case, robust procedure is out the window. If you think that the UK government authorities are going to say, well, look, guys, we like what you've done, Oxford University, because unlike Pfizer, for example, it doesn't have to be stored at minus 70 degrees, which is to me logistically almost impossible. And I know something about frozen distribution and so on and so forth. I don't even know how they're going to work that. And by the way, a second.
I know that's a problem.
It's a huge problem. It makes me wonder why they thought of
vaccine.
Pardon?
That's not a reason not to have it.
That it's impossible to distribute it?
Yeah. That doesn't mean it's not safe.
It means if you can't deliver it to people, you can't find out if it's safe or not.
No, because they're not going to deliver it to people until it's gone through its safety criteria. It's not going to be delivered until... See, MHRA demands a minimum number of patients for something to be tested on. So the more unlikely, the more rare a condition is, the fewer they demand. So for a really rare form of leukemia, they may only demand 50 patients to be to demonstrate whether a drug or an experimental treatment works or not. It may only be 50 because there are only 50 in the country, okay? But coronavirus, they've managed to get between them 130,000 candidates to actually, people like me, to go and have the trial vaccine. People like me to say, yes, I'll be a guinea pig. You can try it on me. I'll go into the trial. And 130,000 is a huge, huge, huge number. It's normal in the tens of thousands.
Okay.
such a huge number. And David, I have to stress to you, it is not time, it is numbers important. It's the number of patients, not time.
Well, we'll set that one aside. Let me ask you a question, Rebecca. Why does the Pfizer one have to be stored at minus 70 degrees?
Because the RNA is unstable. If it's kept at if it's kept at greater than minus 70, it only lasts 5 days. So in order to give it a distribution longer than 5 days, it's basically got to be kept at minus 70. It can then last 5 days in a GP surgery or wherever the vaccination center is. It's got to be given at the 5-day point. The AstraZeneca, it's got a shelf life of a year. Not a problem. Why is it unstable? Because it is an RNA particle. That doesn't make it a Frankenstein particle. It simply will degrade. And that is the safety of it. People are worried that it's a Frankenstein drug. It can't be. It's too unstable. It needs to be injected really quickly once it comes out of its frozen state. Now, one of the things that I identified as a big problem with the Pfizer vaccine was it had to be given cold. And I think that's going to be a problem because it will hurt. It will hurt like hell. And I think they're going to have to give it with a local anesthetic. It's going to be given cold. And that is going to get a lot of negative press. So that is one thing that I see is this cold chain issue is a problem, but we only have enough for 10 million doses. The big one is the AstraZeneca.
Yeah, but and AstraZeneca, to go back on a point you made, AstraZeneca are a for-profit company. So let's be clear.
No, it's not for-profit vaccine.
So they're doing it for just out of generosity.
It's not.
Sorry, can you just confirm to me then that AstraZeneca PLC do not intend to make any profit whatsoever on the costs of
distributing
and globalizing this vaccine? They're just doing it out of what?
For profit. Not for profit. That was Oxford University's stricture. Now,
question.
It is taxpayer funded by a lot of European countries and the UK taxpayer. So instead of the drug company funding it, the taxpayers have funded it. Therefore, I mean, this is an issue I don't actually know the answer to, but I'm going to look into it because it only just occurred to me. Normally, drug companies get 20-year patents, and that represents a high degree of investment they put into R&D. And the fact that drugs normally take 10 years to come to market. So you're looking at a 30-year life cycle for most drugs. I don't think they're going to hold the patent for this. I don't think it is theirs. I think it belongs to Oxford University. Whether they decide, Oxford University and AstraZeneca, I don't know the commercial arrangements between them, but I know it is not for profit.
It's interesting, Rebecca. Why do you think AstraZeneca's share price went up when the announcement was made?
Well, possibly because people didn't realize it was not for profit. But in fact, their share price has dropped.
Yeah, because they were
AstraZeneca. So I do know that AstraZeneca have dropped.
Yeah,
and
but
it went overvalued, massively overvalued, actually.
The thing about it is, here's a question which I think a lot of people watching this will have, and they know where I stand on it. I believe that if people want to take this, it's absolutely down to them. I believe in free choice. Do you think people should have the absolute right to refuse it and be able to travel and go to pubs and sport and just get about their life? Do you think that or not?
It's actually, I don't even think it's relevant what I think, because as you know, I'm a big libertarian, and for me, it cannot be compulsory. I've always said that. But you won't be able to travel to a lot of countries without a certificate to say you've got it. You're not going to be allowed to go into, I think, sport fixtures. There's a grave risk of that. I'm not sure about restaurants. I'm not sure about pubs. I think cinemas might stop you going in, but airlines cannot possibly operate with social distancing, unless they put their prices up threefold. So airlines cannot operate on these restricted numbers. They have to operate at 95% seat occupancy in order to provide cheap flights. Australia will not let you in without a vaccine. Let you in. Nowhere will let you in. India won't let you in. They just do not want you in their health service. If they don't want it. So I think that it's, I mean, like I said.
So a freedom pass is a good way of looking at it, isn't it, Rebecca? A freedom pass sums it up in the name of the vaccine, in the name of saving humanity. And if we don't conform, those of us rebels like me, we will be kept in our little box, and the rest of the world can go back to something that they may think is normal, but it won't be, because they'll be wearing their masks. They'll be doing their social distancing still. Dr. Fauci said it, so I'm sure he's probably some insight on these things. So perhaps the best way to look upon this is we're all in prison, but some of us can get out if we take the jab. And I seem to remember back in the summer, Rebecca, when some people were putting that out, they were dismissed as a bunch of conspiracy lunatics running around with, kind of all kinds of madness. And here we are at the end of the year, and you've just agreed that that's pretty much how it's going to be.
That's how I see it. It's not, you understand, that's not how I want it. Nobody wants this bloody thing to have happened at all. And by the way, I was in Singapore when SARS-CoV-1 happened. It was terrifying because that has a mortality rate of 8.5 to 10%. That was terrifying. And the only reason SARS-CoV-1 didn't take off and then there wasn't a subsequent vaccine was because the R rate was very, very, very low of SARS-CoV-1. Ditto MERS. If we had got a coronavirus with the same fatality as MERS, we would be looking at decimation of humanity. It's 15%, but low R value. Coronavirus has a high R value. So you tell me if you're not going to get a vaccine, how do you get the health service up and running again? Because this has caused massive problems to the health service. Hospitals have been divided into COVID areas and non-COVID areas. And the non-COVID areas are doing everything, and the COVID areas are doing just COVID. We cannot cope any longer in the health service with a system that is really spending too much of its money and resources on a preventable disease, preventable by vaccine. We cannot.
You say that, Rebecca, and then we have to then look at, okay, so if the NHS is now going to be deployed as another thing to beat us over the head with, because we have to protect the NHS, despite the fact it's the other way around. The NHS is there to protect us, not us, the NHS. I looked into some stats the other day for here, where I live in Northern Ireland, and it showed that in the past 6 weeks, 6 weeks stats, the total number of people with COVID, was 87. So that's a total of about 14 people a week, roughly, across the country. And I'm sorry, but if that's bringing the NHS to its knees, and if the NHS just can't cope with 14 people extra coming into all the hospitals we have a week, there's something profoundly wrong with the NHS. And yes, I know it's winter. No, hang on, let me finish. Let me finish. No, let me finish.
I was saying that 87 people aren't being admitted one day and discharged the next. The median length of stay for a COVID patient is 5 weeks once they've been admitted to the hospital. So you also are using up about 4 potential beds for one COVID patient. So you have to multiply every COVID patient by 4 times their length of stay to actually get what impact a COVID patient has on a ward. Okay?
Right.
You cannot treat 10 COVID patients in a 10-bed ward. You can only...
Okay. Okay, for clarity, I never said 87 were in hospital. I didn't say that. I said 87 had tested positive. Now, if the 87 who had tested positive, I don't know how many were false positives. I don't know how many were asymptomatic. I don't know how many went into hospital. I don't know how many needed treatment. I don't know how many were discharged after a day because they were actually all okay, or they had to stay for 5 weeks. Don't know. Why don't I know? Because that information is not shared. Why
Yes,
might
it
that be?
is.
Well, it's not. It's not. It's not. Well, I invite you to.
Today.
I invite you to check for Northern Ireland. I like to see that. I've also checked the numbers for Wales, which are actually even less, despite the draconian third world lockdowns that they've had in Wales. So I don't accept that because of the NHS, I have to give up my freedom. I just don't. I can't accept that. I think it should be the other way around. Actually, the NHS should be enabling my freedom. But
David, you wouldn't want to go on if you had, I don't know, a fall tonight. You wouldn't want to go on a COVID ward. You'd want to go on a non-COVID ward. You wouldn't want to be on a COVID ward. You wouldn't want to be next to a patient who's got COVID. And at the moment, 1,500 people a day in England are being admitted. I got the numbers today. 1,500 people a day are being admitted for COVID. So call that effectively 4,500 beds today taken up by 1,500 COVID patients. Because it's 3 to 1 COVID patient. Then, wait a minute. You have then got a huge 15% of the workforce is off, either self-isolating or sick with COVID, plus another 5% just off sick anyway. So crisis, you've got
self-inflicted.
And they need the vaccine so they don't have to self-isolate. They need the vaccine so they don't get the blasted disease that might
let them take it.
Was ill with it, David.
Yes, no, I understand that, and I know that. I know that if the NHS's staff issues are entirely self-afflicted, I'm aware of the fact in my local health board, 453 staff are off self-isolating. Have they got it? No. Were they in contact with someone that has it? I don't. So yeah, if they want to have it, Rebecca, let them have it, but don't force me to have it, and don't force other people to have it.
No,
that's the way it works. That's the way it works.
Is for you. Therefore, the staff should have the vaccine because we cannot have them at home without being ill. We cannot have healthy staff at home during a pandemic because they won't take a vaccine. So,
but it's not a pandemic, and it's not a pandemic anymore. The numbers in the UK are not pandemic. It's endemic.
Let's not argue over the words. The point is, we have staff at home because of this virus. They should be vaccinated so that they can't be put into isolation.
Well, you've said that I've heard you say the exact same thing about the flu. Because we've chatted about this, Rebecca, where you think NHS staff should be made to have the flu vaccine, because I think I'm right in saying that. So you're actually following your own logic. What you're saying is therefore it follows that NHS staff should be forced to have presumably the COVID on the basis that hospitals are such a great place of infection. And I don't think we necessarily disagree in that one. And I'm not saying that as a problem. My problem is where I'm being told that, it's not just NH staff, actually, it's everybody because COVID. And I'm not prepared to accept that. And there's some really interesting, comments I'm seeing here. It's very hard to talk and read.
Aunt Violet saying most of us are immune now. Okay, Aunt Violet, if you think you're immune, then go and get COVID. Just don't take any precautions. Go and work in a hospital. Go and work in a COVID ward if you think you're immune. I mean, that's the test. If you think you're so safe from this killer bug, if you get it, then I'm sorry, go and put yourself in the face of it, because I think you'll find the minute somebody with known coronavirus comes upon you, you'll be running like hell. I'm going back to my Old Trafford analogy. If somebody's there with 1,500 bullets in a football stadium, you'll run like hell. And that is the analogy to apply here. The NHS,
I'm not sure that it is.
Available beds have been diminished dramatically. And the only thing to get the NHS working again is to have vaccinations. It's absolutely the only way.
Well, they can, but Rebecca, if the NHS want to vaccinate themselves, let them do it. I don't think there's an issue in this one here. I'm happy for them to do it if that helps them become more efficient and actually get about doing their job, which they should be doing. So again, no problem. Of course, it's not necessarily a vaccine that they could take. You're saying the vaccine's the gold standard, but there are, of course, other ways in which NHS staff could protect themselves from COVID. But we can run with the vaccine theme. Tell me this. How come if the flu vaccine, which has been around to the best of my knowledge for about 90 years, something like that, first invented?
No, it's not. The current influenza A has been on national rollout for less than 10 years. So it's not been a mass vaccination program. No. The
flu vaccine came into being 1945 in the US. It initially came in to US Marines. Look it up, Google it, you'll find them right. That's where it came about. I'm not arguing when the what?
It couldn't be more different. It changes every year. It's either influenza A or influenza B, and it mutates every year, almost to clockwork. And
so will COVID. And Rebecca, so will COVID. COVID will mutate, won't it?
It could. Of course it could. And there are mutations, but this is where the mRNA vaccine is the more efficient, much more efficient vaccine. And one of the things that you mentioned in one of your, I don't know why you said this was a reason not to have the vaccine, but you were saying you didn't think the vaccine was going to be much cop because you didn't know how long it was going to last, the immunity. Well, we know the flu vaccine lasts really just for the course of the flu season, really. It only lasts 3 or 4 months, let's be honest, because the flu season dies off about February. But the coronavirus vaccine, they're hoping that it will last a year.
Hoping.
They are hoping. Well, they don't know.
Hoping.
They don't know.
And Rebecca, in a word, that's my argument you just made for me.
That's not a reason not to have it.
They don't know. They don't know. But
you just have it again. That's not a reason not to have a drug.
And again and again and again. But if you don't know what the side, hang on. If you don't know the consequences of having something, you think nonetheless you should have it again and again. Your own words.
You don't understand how vaccines work, David, because vaccines are not drugs. Okay, vaccines are not drugs. Okay, they work by stimulating your immune system. And then if your immune system isn't challenged by the same pathogen, then those antibodies just fade away. This is why older people have vaccinations, younger people have the T killer cell response. By the time you get to 21, your T killer cells die, they get less and less. So we are reliant on antibody resistance. Now, there is some immune recognition, some genetic recognition for antibodies. And what happens is that they see something they sort of recognize, and then they'll fly out and attack it. They are manufactured on site, as it were, okay, in your thymus gland. But with a vaccine like this, because of the risk of mutation of the bug, which isn't that big with coronavirus, by the way, they do not mutate that fast. And that is established science. There are going to be mutations. So the one we've got now is not going to look the same as the one in 5 years' time. But we are going to have to
I know. Yeah, I know that. But
the fact that it could be, it's not going to be like a measles vaccine. It's going to be possibly once a year that you have to have it.
Or twice.
That is reality here. I don't know.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know, but that is what the science is saying now. Because I'm looking at my daughter, by the way, let me just finish. My daughter's a doctor. Most of my family are doctors. So people might wonder why I am as biased as I am. My daughter is on an antibody study because she got COVID back in March. She was ill, properly ill, and she's only in her 20s. She's a junior doctor. She was really properly ill and was very scared. She was breathless. She had a high fever. She had all the long COVID symptoms for about 6 weeks. But she's better now. She's on the antibody study. So she had her antibodies done every 5 days. That is a big commitment, by the way, for somebody to have their blood taken every 5 days. That is a huge commitment to go into that clinical trial. She also went into the trial, which involved taking plasma out. That is an extremely painful procedure, which she has done 3 times. And I am so proud of what my daughter has done because they've harvested antibodies, which will treat the sickest people in ITU with my daughter. Now, her antibodies dropped after the first 3 weeks. So she had a high level, because she had quite a high viral load. She had a high level of antibodies. They then dropped. But she had her antibodies checked a week last Friday, and they've gone up again. Now, that is probably because she has been exposed and re-exposed and re-exposed to coronavirus because she's been working in A&E. So she is exposed to everybody who comes through the front door. And her antibodies have responded, obviously, in response to a coronavirus patient coming in, an unknown coronavirus patient coming in.
Is that like saying, Rebecca, that herd immunity works? Is that like saying that, what you just said?
Yeah. So vaccination is of herd immunity. I mean, we have herd immunity now to measles, because measles, and it's different for different viruses. Measles, you need 95% immunity in the community in order to achieve herd immunity. That is a goal, is herd immunity, and different viruses has different levels at which they can, and that is reliant on, by the way, the R value, because the R value for measles is, I've written it down, 12, which is staggering. If you think we're at 3 for COVID, measles is 12. Therefore, it follows logically that 95% herd immunity is going to knock it back. I'm not sure, but I have read that 80 to 85% for COVID is going to be enough. So there are many people who got COVID back in March, April, and May before they could get tests. There are many people who had it. There are also going to be a huge number of people who think they've had it, but they don't know they've had it. Antibody tests at the moment, the ones that you do at home, are not accurate enough. And the cost of rolling out antibody tests isn't justified at the moment. In fact, it's about 50 times more expensive to do an antibody test than it is to vaccinate somebody. So the herd immunity number, we don't actually know yet what that is for COVID. I think it's going to be in the 80 to 85 because the R number's 3. So that's
but it could. But to be and there's different views in that, and there's different things. Listen, unfortunately, Rebecca, we've gone way past the hour. We have completely exceeded things, but I didn't want to interrupt the flow. So I think, I'll tell you what. Can I give you? I'll try and run this for another couple of minutes. I'll give you 60 seconds to summarize to the point. 60 seconds now, my learned friend. 60 seconds. Why you do summarize your case. Go.
Vaccines are safe. I don't need any more than that.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you. I'll take the advantage of Rebecca's unused time.
I will just say something, because Jed has just said the R number is not 3, it's 1. No, it's not. It's 3. 3. Every virus has a stated R number. COVID is 3. It's actually 2 to 6. But it's 3, so it's not 1. Our R value at the moment is 1 because we're on lockdown. It is 3.
Right. So okay. So Okay, we can. I'll leave Jed to ruminate on that. My summation on this is: I won't be taking a vaccine. I won't be told what to do by these large pharmaceutical companies at this point. I see no reason to do it. I'm grossly offended that I have to get a freedom pass. That tells me I'm living in a prison state. That also equally depresses me in equal measure. I think that if I look at it in the broad, when I see all the media and all the politicians telling me this is a good thing, this is something to take, it makes me even more suspicious. On that note, folks, I will thank, first of all, Rebecca, of course, for being here, and thank you for everyone for respecting Rebecca's point of view. It's not as easy for Rebecca as for me, but
I don't want this situation. Nobody does, and I hate saying you're not going to be allowed to go to Australia without a certificate. But I'm a realist, and I can see that in order to get back to normal, whatever normal is, I don't know what normal is, but to get back to any semblance of normality, you're just going to have it. They're going to force you through the back door. The government's not going to risk unpopularity by saying we demand you have it, but Australia will say you can't come in. I mean, many countries demand vaccinations anyway. For far more lethal bugs than COVID, really far more lethal. I mean, yellow fever being the one in Africa, you can't get to Africa without a yellow fever certificate, but that will kill you if you get it. COVID won't kill you if you get it. I know that. But they are going to force you through the back door. That's sad.
Yeah, it's more than sad. It offends me greatly, and some of us won't accept it, Rebecca. We're not, and if that means we are going to be locked up, so be it. I'm not, but I'll tell you what. Once Boris and Matt Hancock has had it, maybe for about a year, and we've got to understand just how well they're doing on it, then I might have a think about it. But between now and then, I'll be firmly saying no to the COVID vaccines. I will await, of course, the science behind them, not the press releases, the science from Pfizer and Moderna and from Oxford University, because we haven't seen that yet. But that will be published, as you say, and we shall await that with interest. But even as the numbers continue to grow, Rebecca, we're going to have to cut it because I'm exhausted and I'm off to have a lie down in the dark room. But in the meantime, thank you again for being here. Thanks, folks, for all your questions. Thanks for all your comments. Thanks for being part of the stream. To all those who watch this in replay, do make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and my Rumble channel and anything else where you want to find me. And follow Rebecca as well, and of course, on her Twitter and Facebook. So that's it for tonight, folks, and catch up with you real soon. Bye for now. Good night.
Bye.